We have some pretty big news on Evander Kane and the San Jose Sharks. Not only is he surrounded by these allegations, but it looks as though his teammates don't want him back. So was an exit in San Jose inevitable here in the short term? Plus, we also have some signings and some hirings to talk about and some more arbitration news around NHL players. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As you can see, today we're doing something a little different. We're inside the cottage here, not doing outdoor videos. There's just too much outdoor noise and distractions going on, and I want you to actually be able to hear what I'm saying instead of hearing all the noise going on outside. So obviously we're just going to do things a little different. Hope everybody's doing well, enjoying your summer. But we have a lot of important news to talk about here today that I wanted to get to. First up, before we jump into the Kane situation, we have a few other smaller news notes, but certainly Evander Kane is the highlight here of the news cycle here today. So we have some arbitration news. We have two players that are going to arbitration, but not because they elected to, because the team did. So it's team-elected salary arbitration, which is Kevin Fiala with Minnesota and Travis Sanheim in Philadelphia. Now, again, in case you're not familiar with how all this works, arbitration sounds like a nasty word. It doesn't mean that they're even going to end up having the arbitration hearing. So it's kind of like going to court almost. Both sides go in. They argue their case over why they should get what they feel is fair on a contract, and then a third-party arbitrator who's kind of like a judge basically makes the ruling. Now, in this case, because it's team-elected arbitration, the player will then be given the option to get a 1 or 2 year term on the salary that they've determined is fair and appropriate. Now, in both of these players' sake, 2 years walks them right to UFA status, so I would be surprised if they don't select that, assuming it makes it that far. Now, essentially what's going to happen here is they'll set up a date will be determined, a couple weeks down the road for arbitration to be heard. But in the meantime, they can continue to negotiate and talk about contracts and get all this sorted out, just like the other players we've talked about in the last day or two that were player-elected salary arbitration cases. Same thing goes for them. So a high percentage of players that or teams that elect going to those as a last-ditch option, basically, don't happen. Like, I don't know what the percentage is, but I know I've talked about it before. It's like 80 to 90%. It's really high. Usually every year we might get a couple at most that go to arbitration. And the sad part is that when players and teams end up in arbitration, the statistics will alarm you, though, a little bit, that the relationship does not typically last long beyond that. I did a study on it before. I've talked about it on the channel. I think it was last year sometime. I looked at the last, 10 years of salary arb cases. And most players, I think it was within 2 years, were gone from the organization. Because think about it, you're going to court against your employer, essentially. Both sides are going to probably say some nasty things that they wouldn't otherwise to justify what they want. And it can get pretty heated. So obviously it's a scenario where you don't want that to happen at all costs. You don't want to have your employer saying how bad you are and really focusing on the areas that you're not great and all that. So we'll see. Now, in Fiala's case, it was rumored he was looking for over $7 million. And personally, I think that's way, way steep. Now, I think a good comparable is the Buchnevich contract we saw in St. Louis after getting traded from the Rangers, which I believe was 5.8. So, if you look at their stats last year, I think that they're similar enough that at most that's my take. We'll see. So I can see that one maybe heading to arbitration because they're so far apart, and I don't know that Guerin is going to succumb to $7 million demand. So we'll see how that goes. He's also got Kaprizov to worry about, but there's no arbitration rights in that case. So they'll have to work that one out on their own. You have to have at least 4 years of NHL experience before you get arb rights. So that's going to be a tough one. Like I said, and if Minnesota trades for Eichel, which we don't know is going to happen yet, Fiala will almost be guaranteed to be included because they're going to have to move out something. And I think just based on what he wants or demands for salary, it makes sense. So we'll see how that goes. Sanheim, I think, is more likely to get dealt with ahead of arbitration. They're not as far apart. Like I said, these are rare, so we'll see how this happens to go here. Now, in other news, we got the Jordan Kyrou in St. Louis have come to terms in a new 2-year contract. He gets 2 years at $2.8 million, which is pretty good. He had a good breakout year last year with all the exodus in St. Louis that we've seen. He's bound to get a bigger role, especially him and Robert Thomas. At this point, they could still pull off a Tarasenko trade, so depending on the return, it's going to be a very different-looking Blues team. So I think that's a decent, fair team contract for Kyrou, and I would expect him to continue taking things up a notch here. Now, we also had Travis Boyd, formerly of Vancouver, Toronto, Washington, played around in the last few years. I thought Vancouver might keep him, but they've made so many changes there that he's moved on. So he gets a 1-year deal, $750 with the Coyotes. So obviously that's a big change for Travis Boyd. Now we also had some news on the hiring front. It's been rumored and believed to be made confirmed here anytime that former CBJ coach John Tortorella, Torts, is joining ESPN as an analyst for the upcoming season. So that should be interesting. We know he's not afraid to speak his mind, share his opinion. He did work with TSN years back when he was in between jobs before. So he was decent then. I expect him to be one of all the guys around the league and coaching and that kind of stuff that could be a good analyst. To me, he does make a lot of sense, and I can see him fitting in there. So we'll see how that goes, but that should be confirmed. I don't believe it's been confirmed so far. It's just been leaked through insiders so far. And we also had a hire here as well. The New York Rangers have hired John Lilley, former director of amateur scouting for the Maple Leafs, as heading to the Rangers, and he takes a job there where he gets a little bit more responsibility. He's going to be director of player personnel and amateur scouting as well. So certainly a bit of a step up for him to go from one hockey hotbed to another there in the Big Apple. Now, on to the bigger news here of the day, Evander Kane. Now, this is a story that I'm not sure how this is going to play out, but just to give you a quick background in case you didn't catch our other videos or you haven't caught the news, he's been surrounded by controversy for a long time. He's been a polarizing, controversial kind of hockey player for the majority of his career. From the early days, like every move that he's made has been pretty much surrounded by something, having trouble with teammates. And obviously in the last few years, during his time in San Jose, he's had a very public bankruptcy, which is largely due to gambling debts. There was a casino that had a big debt that he apparently owed. And anyways, it's a lot of it. It kind of stirred things up here, made things public. Of course, we talked a few days ago about the social media blast that his soon-to-be ex-wife put him on, really accusing him of some pretty nasty things, among other things. Obviously, they have a young child together, and she basically accuses him of wanting to go party with the girl he's seeing now, which I believe is one of his exes and his buddies, and not wanting to be, taking care of his family and providing for them. She says she's home, can't really afford to buy much of anything, and yet he's jetting off to Europe to party. Yet the guy goes going through bankruptcy. It's hard to wrap your head around. And she also really, on a professional level, I mean, that's pretty low on a personal accusation if that's true. But professionally, he's been accused of gambling on his own games. And she says that, the NHL needs to be aware of this and handle the fact that he is betting on his own games with bookies and throwing games to win money, which is, essentially to settle his big gambling debts, which is absolutely terrible if that's true. I mean, again, I stress to you, we're all in a, cancel culture type of society that we shouldn't jump to conclusions here. You got to remember that this is a husband and wife that are separating, and, things can get nasty, and they have other motivations to want to ruin each other. I'm not saying that he's innocent. I'm not saying he's guilty. I honestly don't know because the facts haven't been proven yet, so I don't want to make a judgment here, because I've seen people go through nasty divorces, some more public than others, and people sometimes stoop to different levels. So we want to give him a chance to clear his name. But at the same time, with his history, I can understand why people assume him to be guilty first, but we shouldn't do that. At the end of the day here, we're more concerned about that little girl's going to be the one that suffers the most, and that's the sad part of all this. But essentially, if he's caught and found guilty of gambling on his own games, he likely is going to get a lifetime ban from the NHL. Now, we got further news that have come out about the situation with Kane and the Sharks, and it's not strictly around it because that's going to take some time. The NHL is investigating. I have no idea when this is going to happen. I would suspect that the NHL is going to recommend to the Sharks, if they don't figure something else here, to put him on some kind of an unpaid leave or some kind of leave of absence or something, kind of like what we saw what happened to Jake Verdanen in Vancouver. To me, that would be wise. But at this point, we have reports from various insiders, and Kevin Kurz, who writes for the beat writer for the Sharks on The Athletic, indicates that the Sharks teammates, several of them, and this all came out before the latest allegations that his wife has made against him, that they don't want him back, that they have a lot of issues with Kane, many of which those issues do revolve around gambling issues, and that they told GM Doug Wilson that they really need to distance themselves from him and move on from him as a player. And like I said, this is all like basically as part of their exit meetings at the end of their season, which was long before these latest things have come out. Which, earlier in the offseason, there were trade rumors around Kane. We talked about him here on the channel, and we talked about the fact that he's a tough player to move because of his contract. Secondly, he, as much as you can say what you want about him, he was probably their best player, at least their best forward last year, and had one of his better seasons. So as far as the whole accusations about throwing games and working with bookies to manage the games, it's hard to imagine. Now, she didn't say that this happened last year. This could have been something that's been ongoing. I don't know. Anyways, but it's hard to imagine it really going down last year because, like I said, he was one of the better players. But all that being said, we'll wait and let the process take out here and prove what's right or not right or what happened or what didn't happen. But essentially, his teammates are fed up with him and don't want him out. And it's going to be easier for Wilson to move on from Kane, as much as it might hurt on the ice, than to try to move, say, a half dozen other players because they want nothing to do with him anymore. So, at the end of the day here, they, like I said, they're fed up with his antics. He's had a lot of tension and, other run-ins with teammates. Like, they're probably tired of hearing the spotlight about, the gambling stuff and bankruptcy and all that. I mean, he's got 4 years left on his deal with the Sharks. It's $7 million a season. That's $28 million. So can the Sharks trade him? I mean, you look around the league, there's teams that could, from an on-ice perspective only, that can benefit from a top-scoring winger like Evander Kane. Like, I know we can look at, probably a half dozen teams, a lot of which would have trouble with cap issues, so San Jose would have to eat some money. But they're not going to want to associate, especially during an ongoing investigation, with this. Now, like I said, that was at the exit meetings. If Doug Wilson would have been able to pull off a trade and get him out of San Jose before this, not that you want to pass the buck, but it would have been another team's issue. At least from the Sharks' perspective, his teammates would have been happy. And I'm sure the acquiring team would have been really ticked after, having all this come out after they acquired him. But from the San Jose perspective alone, it really probably should have got more active to get it done. Now, the other option here, which I know would hurt a bit, be expensive, but to be honest, this team, in my opinion, in San Jose is a bit of a mess, is a buyout. So when players have arbitration elected here, so like when you have a team that has players going through arbitration, it's like player elected salary arbitration, they do get a second buyout window in the offseason once all their RFA cases are settled and signed. So the Sharks do have a player that's like that qualifies them for that. So there is going to be another window where they can look at that. So that might hurt, but I don't know. But I mean, if you look around, like, he went to San Jose with baggage, and let's look at the baggage that's, gone up since more. I mean, on top of what she accused him of gambling, she's accused him of working with criminals and going to casinos and card counting, trying to scam casinos out of money. Like, according to her and everything that she's learned about him in the last couple of years, if it's true, of course, again, innocent until proven guilty, it really shows how deep this gambling problem for him has become. And like I said, I hope a lot of it isn't true, or most all of it really, because it's really, really, really bad news. And like, he really went down a really bad path here, and it's kind of taken over his life. Now, we do know it's definitely a big issue for him, regardless of these latest allegations. Because, I mean, for players making millions of dollars, there's no reason any of them should ever end up in bankruptcy. Like we saw Jack Johnson, that was a completely different scenario where his parents, who were essentially his managers running his money, they're the ones that made a lot of bad decisions and wasted a lot. That's a completely different scenario. But, like, when you're making millions of bucks, there's no reason you should ever go bankrupt. And it's just that you can't handle the fame, you can't handle the money, you end up with some kind of really bad spending issue, which could be linked to this type of behavior, and it just really, really can ruin and take over your life. So we know there's issues there. A lot of it's been documented, but the fact that they don't even want him anymore goes to show you just how bad it is. Now, who would want Evander Kane? Can you look around the NHL and say a team that would really want to make this move right now? I know what people might be saying, well, Montreal could use him. Yeah, well, you know what? Montreal's gone through enough controversy lately with their drafting of Logan Mailloux. I don't see this happening. The league's already pissed at him over that. That's not going to happen. If the Blues trade Tarasenko, they could use a player like him. But really, is anybody going to want to associate with this? The Islanders are another team. They want a big scoring winger. He'd be great if all of the off-ice baggage wasn't there. I don't see anybody touching this. To me, the most likely scenario is either he gets bought out after their RFA cases are done and they get that second window, or he ends up, if they can, I'm not sure if they can terminate the contract anyway. They're probably talking to the league about that, or if they can just somehow place him on the leave. I don't know if they have to pay him or not, but either way, gets him out of their locker room. But it says from an on-ice perspective only, it's going to hurt because he was one of their best players last year, especially. So let me know what your thoughts are on this whole Evander Kane situation. Can he be traded? Will he be bought out? I think it's safe to say that if they do the right thing here based on what the team wants, he won't be back, and his time with San Jose will be over. But will his time in the NHL be over? That's a big question, and a bigger one that we're going to have to wait and learn here over the coming weeks as everything takes course and plays itself out. So again, we're coming to you here from the road. We're still in Digby, Nova Scotia for another day. We're heading into Halifax to visit the city here for a couple of days before we head home. So there'll be more videos from the road with a little bit of a different perspective and a different scenery here. So we'll see how that goes. Again, if you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We will keep you up to date with all the latest news and rumors on all 32 NHL teams. We will be catching you next time.